Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
We did not know what to call it at first. Reth Kavan, the pressure swimmer from the Deluvan Deep, said it felt like watching water move uphill. Not wrong, not broken, just wrong in a direction that shouldn't exist. Suno, the eldest of the Marathi delegates, said nothing. She simply held all four of her secondary arms against her chest, which, for a Marathi, is the gesture you make when something has frightened you in a way you find beautiful. The Voakai sensor cluster in Section 9 registered an anomaly in its gravitational prediction models and spent the next 6 minutes attempting to file a correction report before concluding, with what we can only describe as mechanical embarrassment, that the anomaly was not an error. It was a girl, 19 years old, 71 standard body mass units, one gravity brace on her left ankle, scuffed at the heel from what the materials analysis suggested was approximately 4,000 hours of repeated impact, possibly more. She moved through the zero-gravity demonstration corridor at Uvara Station, and she moved through it the way certain rare things move, not as though she was defying the physics of the place, but as though she had simply made a private agreement with physics that the rest of us were not invited to. We are the collective. We are 11 billion individual crystalline nodes distributed across a body the size of a small moon, and we perceive the universe primarily as mathematics. We find most things in time predictable. We had never calculated anything like her. She arrived at Uvara Station on a mid-transit cargo hauler, which is the cheapest way to travel between the inner human systems and the deep space belt. The journey takes 19 days. The sleeping quarters on a cargo hauler are approximately the size of a storage locker, which is, in fact, exactly what they are. She did not complain about this. According to the hauler's crew manifest, we reviewed it later. She spent most of the 19 days in the cargo hold, which had been cleared of freight, and had, therefore, approximately 40 cubic meters of open space. She used it to train. Her name was Sarah Akaffer. She was registered for the Interstellar Physical Trials under the Human Biological Division, Tier 4, which is the lowest competitive tier available at the trials, and the only tier that does not require a species endorsement from a recognized galactic governing body. Humans had been eligible for Tier 4 for 11 years. In 11 years, no human competitor had advanced past the preliminary demonstration round. The morning she arrived, we observed the registration hall through our sensor nodes. It was full. The Deluvan pressure swimmers moved in their moisture suspension rigs, their gill fronds fanning slowly in the recycled air. The Marathi stood in loose groups, their four arms gesturing rapidly to each other in the shorthand they use when they believe no one else can read it. We can always read it. That morning, the word they kept returning to was small. A Voakai competitor, tall, six-limbed, his exoskeletal plating the deep amber color that indicates peak physical conditioning in his species, looked at Sarah once as she crossed the hall with her registration chip and her single travel bag. He looked at her ankle brace. He looked away. Sarah did not notice, or perhaps she did, and had long ago decided that noticing was not a productive use of her time. We could not determine which. That was the first moment we encountered what would become a recurring problem with Sarah Akaffer. She was very difficult to read. She found her assigned quarters, which were in the human residential block, a section of Uvara Station that was built to human atmospheric specifications and had, we noted, 17% fewer amenities than the Marathi block and 22% fewer than the Deluvan. This was not malicious. It was, according to the station's resource allocation algorithm, proportional to competitive historical performance. It is possible, in retrospect, that the station's resource allocation algorithm had certain structural flaws. Sarah dropped her bag on the bunk, sat down, and pulled out a small comm device. The signal delay to Earth from Uvara Station is approximately 4 minutes each way. She waited 8 minutes after sending the connection request. Then her father's face appeared on the screen, slightly pixelated, the kitchen behind him lit by the particular warm yellow of early morning Earth light. "You made it," Dennis Okafor said. "I made it," Sarah said. He looked at her for a moment. He was 51 years old. He had the same eyes as his daughter, or rather, she had his, which is how these things work. He had competed at Uvara Station 22 years ago, and he had not won, and he had come home and built a gymnasium in the basement of a house in Lagos, and spent the next 2 decades coaching his daughter in a sport that most of the galaxy did not believe humans were built for. "How's the ankle?" he said. "Fine," she said. "Sarah." "It's manageable," she said. "It's fine enough." He nodded slowly. The nod of a man who knows his daughter is telling him the truth but not all of it, and who has decided that, for now, this is acceptable. "Show me the brace." She held up her ankle. He leaned toward his screen, studied it, and said 3 technical things about the tension calibration that we will not reproduce here, because they were extremely specific and took several minutes, during which Sarah made small adjustments with a tool from her bag, and her father watched, and said more, stop, perfect. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay," she said. "You know what to do." "I know what to do." "You've always known what to do. I just helped you remember it faster." She smiled then. It was a small smile, the kind that is mostly contained in the corners of the eyes, and it lasted approximately 1.4 seconds before she put it away and became serious again. "We logged it. We did not know yet why it seemed important. We log many things that seem important before we understand them. Let us explain SEAL, because SEAL requires explanation, and because understanding SEAL is necessary for understanding what happened next. SEAL stands for Certified Evolutionary Index Limiter. It is not technically a single machine. It is a regulatory framework, 300 years old, authored collaboratively by the 9 founding species of the galactic physical trials, revised 47 times, and administered by a distributed artificial system that has, in 3 centuries of operation, never once issued a ruling that was successfully overturned on appeal. The logic of SEAL is as follows. Every biological species has a performance ceiling, a mathematically derived upper boundary of physical capability, calculated from evolutionary history, skeletal structure, neurological processing speed, and approximately 2,400 other variables. The ceiling is not a punishment. It is, according to SEAL's founding charter, a protection, a way of ensuring that competitions are evaluated not against an absolute standard, but against each species' realistic potential. In practice, what this means is that each competitor arrives at the trials with a number above their head, not literally, but effectively. The Volkai competitor in the amber exoskeletal plating had a performance ceiling of 94.7. The Marathi delegates ranged between 88 and 91. The Deluvan pressure swimmer, Reth Kavan, who had won the previous 2 cycles, carried a ceiling of 96.2, which was the highest in this year's field. Sarah Okafor's performance ceiling, as calculated by SEAL using the full human evolutionary dataset, was 61.4. The next lowest ceiling in the field was 79.8. We observed this number with the particular quality of attention we reserve for things that do not immediately compute. We had reviewed Sarah's training records, partially. Many of them were stored on a personal device that did not connect to the station network, which was itself unusual. The records we could access suggested a competitor of considerable technical precision. But our models, which are very good models, said 61.4, and our models had never been meaningfully wrong. We began, as we always do, to calculate probabilities. The probability of Sarah Achafer advancing past the preliminary round, 3.2%. The probability of her completing a competitive routine without re-injuring the ankle, 41%. The probability of her performance causing us to revise our fundamental understanding of human physical capability. We did not calculate this. It did not occur to us to calculate it. This was, in retrospect, the most significant error we have made in 300 years of continuous observation. 22 years ago, a man named Dennis Achafer arrived at Uvara Station on a cargo hauler. He was the third human ever to qualify for the interstellar physical trials. The first two had withdrawn before the demonstration round. Dennis did not withdraw. He completed his routine in the zero-gravity corridor, scored 58.3 against a ceiling of 60.1, the highest percentage of ceiling performance any human had ever achieved, and was eliminated in the preliminary round. None of this is what people remembered about Dennis Achafer. What they remembered, what we remembered, what the Marathi delegation still occasionally references in their interarm shorthand, was what he did after his score was posted. He stood in the center of the demonstration corridor, in the strange floating stillness of zero gravity, and he looked at the scoreboard for a long moment. Then he looked up at the observation gallery, where the judges sat behind their curved transparisteel panels. Then he smiled. Not a small smile, a large one, the kind that takes up the whole face and doesn't apologize for it. And then he bowed, a full, formal, deliberate bow to the judges, to the other competitors, to the station itself. The gesture of someone who has just done something they are proud of, regardless of what the scoreboard says. The Volocai competitors, who do not have a cultural concept of graceful defeat, were reportedly unsettled. The Marathi delegates conferred rapidly in their shorthand. Reth Kavan, who was 19 years old that year and competing in her first trials, watched from the warm water observation pool and later told her Kresh sisters that she had not understood the gesture but had felt, watching it, that it meant something significant. We watched Dennis Achafer leave the corridor. We ran his biometric data. His heart rate was elevated but steady. His cortisol levels were high but not distressed. His expression, by every metric we had, indicated satisfaction. We filed this under human behavioral anomalies, unexplained, which is a file that has, over the years, become quite large. We did not know, watching him go, that he would spend the next 22 years building something inside a basement gymnasium in Lagos, calibrating gravity braces and correcting the tension on ankle supports and saying, to a small girl with his same eyes, "You know what to do. You've always known what to do. I just helped you remember it faster." We did not predict this. We should have. At 300 station time, when the rest of Uvara Station's competitors were in their quarters, Sarah Achafer was in Corridor 7. Corridor 7 is a maintenance passage, not designed for training, not equipped for it, not officially available for it. It had, however, three things that Sarah needed: a zero-gravity toggle switch that the maintenance crew had left in the unlocked position, approximately 30 meters of clear length and no other people in it. She had found it on her first day. We observed her walking the station's maintenance routes for 2 hours that afternoon, systematically, methodically, not exploring but assessing. When she found Corridor 7, she stood in it for a moment, looked at the zero-gravity toggle, and nodded once to herself. She trained there every night from 300 to 500. We watched. What Sarah was working on was not, technically, a recognized competitive movement. It had no official name in the trials registry. It had emerged, as far as we could reconstruct from her training records, from approximately 8 years of her father watching footage of every non-human competitor at every trials on record, and making notes, and then designing something that a human body, specifically, A human body with Sarah's particular ratio of fast-twitch muscle fiber, her specific joint hypermobility, and her left ankle that had been broken and rebroken, and rebuilt so many times that it had fused in a configuration that was technically abnormal and practically, it turned out, extraordinary. Her ankle did not articulate the way a standard human ankle articulates. It did something slightly different, something that, in zero gravity, produced an angular momentum vector that our models had not previously encountered. We watched her work this movement, alone, at 300 in a maintenance corridor, for 5 nights before we understood what we were seeing. On the 6th night, we recalculated. We did not update our public-facing probability estimate. We were not yet sure enough, and there was another variable we had not yet accounted for. We learned about the transit licenses on the 4th day, when we ran a routine financial background on all competitors. Human families in the deep space belt receive 2 transit licenses per household, the right to travel the inner routes at regulated cost, which is the difference between being able to move through the galaxy and being effectively stranded. They are not sold. There is no official market for them. There is an unofficial one. The Akafer family had sold both of theirs 6 months ago. The amount they received corresponded almost exactly to the cost of a one-way cargo hauler passage from the inner human systems to Uvara Station, plus 19 days of station accommodation, plus the Tier 4 registration fee. We noted this, we added it to the file. The file, at this point, was becoming less a collection of anomalies and more a kind of portrait. We did not have a word for what we were looking at. We are 11 billion nodes and we process in 17 simultaneous mathematical dimensions, and we did not have a word for what we were looking at. We think now that the word is commitment, but it is a human word, and human words, we have found, carry more weight than their definitions suggest. On the morning of the 5th day, SEAL filed a flag. It appeared in the administrative queue at 6:12 station time. A standard procedural notice, the kind that is generated automatically when a competitor's biometric data, updated through the station's passive health monitoring system, falls outside acceptable competition parameters. Sarah's ankle. The passive monitoring had caught what the gravity brace was designed to conceal, the specific thermal signature of a joint that was not, by standard medical classification, competition ready. The fracture history, the abnormal fusion, the stress indicators that suggested, according to SEAL's medical modeling, a 73% probability of acute injury under full competitive load. SEAL's ruling was precise, and within its own logic, completely correct. Sarah Akafer's injury history placed her below the minimum physical threshold for safe Tier 4 competition. Her registration was flagged for administrative review. Pending review, her preliminary demonstration slot would be held but not confirmed. The review board convened at 900. 3 officials, 1 Marathi, 1 Volkai, 1 from the Deluven Administrative Corps. They were not unkind. They reviewed the biometric data, reviewed SEAL's flag, reviewed Sarah's medical records, which she was required to submit in full. We observed the meeting through the room's sensor array. The Marathi official read the ankle's fracture history and held all 4 of her secondary arms very still, which is the Marathi equivalent of a sharp intake of breath. The Volkai official said, "The data is clear." The Deluven official said, "We have a responsibility to competitor safety." The Marathi official said more quietly, "Has she been informed?" Sarah had been informed. She was sitting in the corridor outside the review room. We could see her through the hallway sensor. She was sitting very straight, her travel bag on the floor beside her, her hands folded in her lap. Her comm device was on the bag, screen down. She had not tried to call her father. We ran our probability model again. Probability of Sarah Akafer receiving clearance to compete, 12%. We did not want to run the next calculation. We ran it anyway, because we always run all the calculations. Probability of the HFY family recovering financially from the transit license sale if Sarah did not compete, 34% over 10 years. We closed that calculation very quickly. It is unusual for us to close a calculation quickly. We are not sure what to call the reason we did it. Inside the review room, the HFY official was preparing to deliver the formal ruling. The Marathi official had her secondary arms folded. The Deluven official was looking at the table. The door opened. Sarah HFY walked in without knocking, which is not the correct procedure, and which caused all three officials to look up with varying expressions of surprise. She said, "Before you finalize the ruling, I want to make a request." The HFY official said, "This is not the time for it." "I'm not asking to overturn anything," Sarah said. Her voice was very calm. We ran her vocal stress indicators, low, genuinely low. "I'm asking for 4 minutes on record, a formal demonstration logged in the trial's record before the ruling is finalized. That's within my rights under Article 7 of the Tier 4 competitor charter." There was a silence. It was, we noted, 11 seconds long. We counted. The Marathi official looked at the other two. The HFY official looked at Seal's ruling on his display. The Deluven official looked at Sarah. 4 minutes, the Deluven official said finally, "On record." "On record," Sarah confirmed, and she almost smiled, not quite, but almost. We recalculated. We were still wrong. We would not know how wrong for another 4 minutes. The demonstration was held in the main zero-gravity corridor at 1100 station time, because it was on record and therefore required official space. This meant that, according to station protocol, observers were permitted. By 10:55, the observation gallery was full. We had not predicted this either. Word travels quickly on a station the size of Uvara when something unusual is scheduled, and a human Tier 4 competitor requesting a formal demonstration before a disqualification ruling was, by most species assessment, unusual enough to watch. Reth Kavan was there. She had brought 3 of her Kresh sisters. The HFY competitor in the amber plating was there, standing at the back with his arms folded in the posture his species uses for reluctant attention. 2 Marathi athletes were there with their full delegation. The maintenance crew from Quarter 7 was there. They had, we realized, known all along that someone was training in their passage at 300 and had left the gravity toggle unlocked on purpose. This was the kind of thing we consistently failed to predict about the support structures that form around humans. They are rarely alone in the ways that are visible. Dennis HFY was there too, in the only way he could be. Sarah had propped her comm device against the corridor wall, angled toward the demonstration space, and his face was on the screen, pixelated but present. The Lagos kitchen bright behind him even though it was the middle of his night. The 3 review officials took their seats at the official observation panel. Seal's administrative interface was active and recording. Sarah floated to the center of the corridor. She paused for a moment, the way her father had paused 22 years ago, just long enough to take a breath, just long enough to arrive fully in the place she was standing. Then she began. We will attempt to describe what happened next, though we should note in advance that our description will be inadequate. We are 11 billion nodes. We process in 17 simultaneous mathematical dimensions. We have observed physical competition at Uvara Station for 300 years. Our description will still be inadequate because what Sarah HFY did in those 4 minutes was not primarily a physical event. It was a category event. It was the kind of thing that requires a new category. She moved through the zero-gravity corridor using a sequence that her father had spent 8 years designing from footage and notes, and a basement gymnasium in Lagos. The sequence used standard Tier 4 recognized movements for its first 40 seconds. Clean, precise, well within her rated capability. The kind of performance that would score perhaps 58 or 59 against her ceiling of 61.4. Seal was tracking and scoring. We observed the running score on the administrative display: 57.2, 58.8, 59.1. And then at the 41-second mark, Sarah's left ankle, the broken one, the rebuilt one, the one that had fused abnormally, the one that Seal had flagged as a liability, initiated a movement that was not in the Tier 4 registry. It was not in the Tier 3 registry. It was not, as far as we could determine in the seconds following, in any registry at all. The angular momentum vector we had observed in Corridor 7 at 300, the one produced by the abnormal ankle fusion, the one our models had not encountered before, engaged fully under competitive load, in zero gravity, with 8 years of deliberate training behind it. And it did something to Sarah's trajectory through space that caused Reth Kavan to press all 4 secondary arms against her chest, and caused the Voakai competitor in the amber plating to uncross his arms and lean forward, and caused the maintenance crew from Corridor 7 to make a sound collectively that had no official translation but meant, in the way that sounds sometimes mean things without words. Yes, that, exactly that. Seal's scoring interface paused. This had not happened in 300 years. The pause lasted 0.7 seconds, which in computational terms is approximately the equivalent of a human standing very still in a field, staring at the sky and asking quietly, "What was that?" The score on the administrative display read 61.4. And then the display did something it had no protocol for. It displayed a question mark. Because Sarah was still moving. She was past her ceiling. She was in the unmeasured space above it, doing something that Seal did not have a scoring rubric for, and Seal, for the first time in 300 years, did not know what number to assign to what it was watching. We know what that feels like now. We felt it too. She landed, if landing is the right word for the controlled deceleration in zero gravity that she achieved with 3 contact points and 0 instability. At the 3-minute 58-second mark, 2 seconds before her allotted time expired. There was a silence in the observation gallery. It was longer than 11 seconds. We counted 34 before Reth Kavan began to make the low, resonant sound that Deluvens produce when they are moved past the point of words. It is not applause. It is more like a frequency. Several other observers began to produce their own species equivalents, and the corridor filled with a layered sound that we do not have a mathematical term for and will not attempt to assign one. On the comm device against the wall, Dennis Akafer was not making any sound at all. He had his hands over his mouth. His eyes were very bright. The review officials sat with their displays. Seal's administrative interface was, we should note, still displaying a question mark. It would continue to display a question mark for the next 6 hours while its processing system attempted to determine which existing scoring category applied to what it had recorded. It would ultimately file an internal report noting that it could not complete the scoring assessment because the performance in question did not fit within any established tier category, Tier 4, Tier 3, or otherwise. This, as it turned out, was the ruling that mattered. The Marathi official spoke first. She said carefully, "Seal cannot score this performance." "Correct," the Voakai official said. He was still leaning forward. He had not returned to the folded arm posture because it doesn't fit the category. "Which category?" the Deluven official said. "Any of them," the Voakai official said. There was another pause. "Then the disqualification ruling," the Marathi official said slowly, "is predicated on a performance ceiling for a category that this competitor has demonstrably moved outside of. You can't apply a Tier 4 ceiling," the Deluven official said, "to a performance that isn't Tier 4. And you can't apply any other ceiling," the Marathi official said, "because there isn't a registered category for what she just did." Seal's disqualification flag, which was tied to Sarah's Tier 4 performance ceiling, automatically lapsed at 11:47 station time. Not because it was overturned, because the thing it was measuring no longer existed. Sarah had not broken her ceiling. She had performed above and beyond it, into a space that Seal's architecture did not have a name for, and you cannot disqualify a competitor for exceeding a limit that, by the evidence, does not apply to them. Sarah was floating at the edge of the corridor, her hand on the wall, her ankle brace scuffed and intact. She was breathing steadily. She looked at the officials, and then she looked at the comm device. And when she found her father's face on the screen, she looked at it for a long time before she smiled. The full smile this time, the one that takes up the whole face. He was already smiling. He had been smiling, we realized, since the 41-second mark. Since the moment his daughter had initiated the movement he had spent 8 years helping her build, in a basement gymnasium in Lagos, out of footage and notes, and the particular ankle fusion that every doctor had called a complication, and that he had, very quietly, called something else. He had called it the thing we are going to use. We added this to the file. The file at this point had stopped being a collection of anomalies. We were not sure what it had become. We are still not entirely sure. We have tentatively labeled it evidence. We have updated our models 47 times since the morning Sarah Akafer arrived at Uvara Station on a cargo hauler. We have updated the human performance ceiling projection. We have updated our biometric assessment protocols to flag ankle fusion configurations as potentially advantageous rather than automatically injurious. We have updated our prediction algorithms to include a variable we have labeled, somewhat reluctantly, basement gymnasium training effect, which accounts for the statistical impact of long-term highly personalized coaching in resource-limited environments. The variable is real. We have confirmed it across multiple cases now. We do not fully understand it. We have also updated our internal filing system. The folder labeled Human Behavioral Anomalies, Unexplained, has been renamed. It is now labeled Human Behavioral Patterns, Partially Understood. This is a significant upgrade in our confidence level. We have been observing humans for 31 years, and we have moved from unexplained to partially understood. We expect to reach mostly understood by approximately the time the sun in their system goes cold. We are being somewhat sarcastic. We are not entirely sure when we developed the capacity for sarcasm. We suspect it was somewhere around the 3rd year of observing humans. Sarah Akafer competed in the trials that cycle in a newly created exhibition category. Not Tier 4, not Tier 3, but a provisional classification that the trial's governing board convened an emergency session to establish, called Open Form, which is defined in the registry as performance that exceeds existing categorical measurement and requires independent assessment. There are currently 4 competitors registered in Open Form across all species. 3 of them are human. The 4th is a Marathi teenager who watched Sarah's demonstration from the gallery and went home and did something in a training facility that her coaches could not fully explain. We are monitoring her as well. We monitor all of them. We monitor them with the particular quality of attention we reserve for things that do not immediately compute, which has become, where humans are concerned, the only quality of attention we have. Seal has been revised. Not significantly. The revision is 4 paragraphs in a 300-year-old document, added after a committee process that took 7 months and involved considerable administrative disagreement. The revision states, in summary, that a performance ceiling is a predictive model derived from historical data, and that historical data cannot account for variables that have not yet occurred. It further states that where a competitor's demonstrated performance exceeds the predictive ceiling, the ceiling is to be understood as incomplete rather than violated. We wrote the first draft of that revision. We thought it was accurate. The committee accepted it with minor modifications. It is accurate. It is also, we have since concluded, the most important thing we have written in 3 centuries. Because here is what we know now, that we did not know the morning a cargo hauler docked at Uvara station, and a quiet girl in a scuffed gravity brace walked into the registration hall. A ceiling is a calculation. A calculation is only as complete as the data that built it, and data is always, always historical. Data is the record of what has already happened. It cannot account for a man in a basement gymnasium in Lagos who looks at the thing everyone calls a complication and says, "That is the thing we are going to use." It cannot account for a girl who trains alone at 300 in a maintenance corridor for 5 nights before her biggest competition, not because she has no other option, but because she has decided, calmly and completely, that 4 minutes on record will be enough. It cannot account for what humans decide to do with the thing they have been given. This is the error in our models. We have tried to correct it. We keep making it again. Every human we observe, we assign a ceiling, and every ceiling we assign, we are eventually wrong about. Not always by this much, not always this dramatically, but wrong. We have begun to suspect that the error is not in our models. We have begun to suspect that the error is in the concept. Limits are not discovered. That is what we believed for 300 years about every species we observed, that limits are waiting inside biology, fixed and findable, and that the task of science is to locate them accurately. This is what SEAL was built to do. This is what we were built to do. Sarah Akafer floated in the zero-gravity corridor at 11:04 station time, at the 41-second mark of a 4-minute demonstration, and she used the ankle that everyone had called a liability, and she went somewhere our models did not have a name for. And here is the thing, the actual thing, the thing we are still processing 7 months later across all 11 billion of our nodes. She knew she was going there. She had always known she was going there. Her father had helped her figure out how, and neither of them had needed our models to tell them it was possible. They had simply decided. We are 11 billion nodes. We perceive the universe as mathematics. We have watched 3 centuries of competition at Uvara station. We are updating our models. We expect to still be wrong. We find, remarkably, that we do not entirely mind. Somewhere in Lagos, in a basement gymnasium with a gravity toggle on the wall and a small screen that now shows, on a regular basis, the face of a girl floating in the light of a deep space station. A man sits with a cup of tea and a notebook full of 8 years of calculations, and he is smiling. He is smiling the way he smiled 22 years ago in the zero-gravity corridor, when the scoreboard said what it said and he bowed anyway. We logged that smile then. We understand it now. It meant we are not finished yet. It always means that with them. It always means that.